The moment I had been dreading finally arrived. My husband, who has tormented me endlessly, and his ever-critical mother. I can't even count the number of tears I've shed and the times I've been hurt. Despite it all, I've held on, trying my best to fulfill my role as a wife and homemaker. But my husband? He never seemed to care about my struggles. He even decided to move his mother into our home without consulting me. Is your mom all moved in? Of course, she is. But here's the thing. Yeah, she's settled in. In fact, I just finished moving back to my parents' home. Wait, what? Your parents' place? His voice over the phone was tinged with panic. I could tell he hadn't seen this coming. But don't think it ends here. I owe you for all the pain you've caused me. My name is Eleanor, a 44-year-old homemaker. I met Raymond at a party when I was 20, and we instantly clicked. Just 3 months later, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. A year later, as I turned 21, he asked, "Will you marry me?" A year after our marriage, I became pregnant, and our first son was born. I thought I would have the fairy tale life I had dreamt of during my school days. But life wasn't that simple. Hey, is dinner ready yet? Did you make the bed? That's what Raymond always says when he comes home from work. I sometimes wonder if he thinks of me as just a maid. I'm sorry, I got a bit tied up. I'll get everything ready now. Seriously? Don't you think about how tired I am after work? I deal with so much stress to provide for our family. And remember, I'm a manager. A manager. Whenever something doesn't go his way, Raymond starts ranting about being a manager and makes snide remarks. He wasn't like this when we first got married. People often ask if I'm okay with how he behaves. Of course, I'm not. It's unbearable. But honestly, I do appreciate that he brings in the money. Thanks to Raymond's good salary, we've never had financial troubles. But imagine if I challenged him wrongly and he retorted, "You're defying me? Fine, I'll stop contributing to the house then." I wouldn't know what to do. So, even if he says a bit much sometimes, I try to tolerate it, though I wish I could say it's always easy. But with the way Raymond's been acting lately, even that tolerance is strained. Like the other day, he ranted, "Why aren't the clothes dry? You didn't even use the dryer, did you? I told you before. I like my clothes feeling cozy. They need to be fluffy from the dryer." I had a lot on my plate, with shopping and chores. I didn't get to the dryer. That's not the point. I work hard every day, but what about you? Aren't you a homemaker? Shouldn't you have time for at least this? Raymond never does household chores. He believes that's the wife's job. Just because I'm a homemaker doesn't mean I always have free time. I wish he'd help out a little. It was the same when our child was born. I'm busy with work, I'm tired. Always some excuse. So I've done all the household and childcare duties by myself. But there's another source of stress. My mother-in-law. Eleanor, did you clean this properly? And what are you planning for dinner tonight? Surely not some takeaway. Whenever my mother-in-law visits, she's always like this. She constantly looks for my mistakes and never hesitates to criticize. Both mother and son act similarly, like they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And today, she started again. Eleanor, how many times have I told you? Clean the house every day to make it comfortable for my son. Why don't you? Are you ignoring my advice on purpose? This is why I was against my son marrying someone like you. You can't even manage the house properly. Just looking at you infuriates me. Constant criticism from Raymond and my mother-in-law, and I endure it all with a smile. But there's one thing I just can't overlook, mother-in-law's gambling habit. Whenever she has the chance, she's playing poker, slot machines, roulette, or craps. She just loves to gamble. And she spends all her money in the blink of an eye. Worse still, she laughs about it. And Raymond just laughs along with her. Hold on a second. Whose money do you think you're using? The money mother-in-law spends on gambling comes from our household savings. I've brought this up to Raymond multiple times, but I'm just as upset about it. Hey, could you tell Mom? I mean, I could tell her, but if I do, I think she'll be really shocked. Plus, I'm so busy with work, I don't think I can discuss it calmly. He always comes up with these excuses and never acts. So, I decide to convey Raymond's message to mother-in-law for him. Why can't a mother use the money her son earns? He's told me I can use as much as I want, she retorted. Thinking that Raymond would back me up, I say, Raymond feels the same way. Could you please stop using our household savings without asking? Right, honey? But Raymond interjects. What are you talking about? This household savings is for all three of us. Excluding only Mom is wrong. Sorry, Mom. Don't listen to her. She's lying. You can use the money as you always have. This is how Raymond always changes his story depending on who he's talking to. Moreover, he started blaming me for mother-in-law's gambling habits, saying they worsened after we got married 3 months ago. That's just not true. Even before our marriage, mother-in-law was gambling frequently. Whenever I went shopping, I'd see her coming out of the local poker club. But when I bring this up to Raymond, he accuses me of lying and then ignores the issue. He'll never see his mother's true colors. Their snide remarks keep coming, and I'm getting fed up. Oh, look at the time. I should get going. Wait, Mom. You didn't forget about our plan, right? How are the preparations? Yes, they're well underway. What plan? What are these two up to? I'm taken aback by Raymond's sudden question and try to figure out their scheme. With that, mother-in-law, humming a tune, leaves in high spirits. At last, she's gone. I think to myself. I look over, and Raymond is grinning from ear to ear, waving until his mother's out of sight. A week later, I finally understood the meaning behind Raymond's words about preparations. Have a good day. Slam. As usual, Raymond leaves for work without responding to my farewell. While most couples would greet each other with smiles, that warmth is long gone between us. I gaze out the window and see a neighboring family, looking so happy as they walk by. I remember the days when my son and I used to go for walks just like that. Lost in my thoughts in the morning, the doorbell rings. Yes, who is it? Oh, it's you, mother-in-law. Wait, where's Raymond? I wasn't expecting her to show up today, especially not this early in the morning. Oh, something came up at his work, so he had to go in unexpectedly. I see. Why on earth is she here? She's not expecting to have breakfast with me, is she? No way she would think of doing that, or would she? A flurry of thoughts about mother-in-law race through my mind. Then she says, Why are you standing there looking so blank? Get things ready. Ready for what? I haven't eaten anything since this morning. I'm hungry, so make me breakfast. And make sure this doesn't happen again. What does she mean by from now on? The words get ready that Raymond mentioned earlier in mother-in-law's from now on phrase make me uneasy. For some reason, I had a terrible feeling about this. Feeling anxious about their comments, mother-in-law pressures me to make breakfast. I apologize and start preparing the meal. Meanwhile, mother-in-law observes me, not even blinking. More like monitoring than observing, maybe? It's hard to do. Under her piercing gaze, I silently and earnestly prepare the breakfast. Suddenly, mother-in-law says, It's pitiful to think my son eats this poorly presented food every day. It looks terrible and probably tastes just as bad. I'd love to know how you manage to cook so poorly. She ridicules me, mockingly laughing and complaining. Why do I have to hear all this first thing in the morning? What was supposed to be a pleasant morning felt as if it had turned into a downpour. Sorry for the wait. It took you long enough. How much time do you need for a meal like this? Maybe you should attend a cooking class? Then you might be able to cook something decent. Though, even then, it'd be like getting a D instead of an F. Having a meal alone with my mother-in-law for the first time. Seeing her stern face while eating, I lost my appetite, and the meal I put so much effort into tasted bland. Suddenly, my mother-in-law set down her fork, stating, "I don't even feel like eating this. Clear it away." I'm sorry. I just can't take this anymore. I wish she'd leave sooner. But little did I know my wish would be shattered in no time. Ring ring. Excuse me for a moment. "Hey, Mom's there, right? Let me talk to her." Handing the phone to my mother-in-law after Raymond's request, she exclaimed, "You told me we'd discuss that matter, making me come over so early. Now, you say you're at work? What's going on?" "Sorry, something came up. I'll be back before noon. Just relax till then. Hurry up, being with her is just stressful." She ended the call with Raymond and returned the phone to me with a slight throw. Trying to ask what Raymond had said, she just glared and told me he'd be back before noon. 3 hours later, Raymond returned home and immediately asked her, "Sorry, Mom. So, are you ready?" "Yes, just need to pack my things." "Pack? What?" Before I could process, Raymond dropped a bombshell. "From now on, Mom will live here too." "What?" It was a shock. I always thought it would just be the two of us living here, but now my mother-in-law will be moving in too. The mere thought of my mother-in-law coming here terrifies me. Living a life constantly getting snide remarks from Raymond and my mother-in-law every day? I just can't bear the thought of it. "Mom, I'll help you move on my next day off." "That would be helpful. But don't bring her along. We don't need someone useless." "Don't worry. It'll just be me." The shocking twist left my mind blank, unable to process anything. That evening, Raymond and his mom went out for dinner. Alone, I pondered our future. How would I coexist with the two of them? Was I just supposed to endure everything? Or was there another way? The same thoughts kept replaying, but no answers came. Lost in my despair, I felt tears spilling when suddenly, ring ring. A phone call. Wiping away my tears, I answered and the voice on the other end was, "Oh." A call from the most unexpected person. The familiar voice echoed in my ear when I picked up the phone. "Mom, it's been a while." "Eric, it has indeed. Have you been well?" "Yeah, I'm good. Granddad and Granny are also doing well. We're all getting along." It was my son, Eric, on the other end. After graduating from college, Eric took a job at a company near our family home. Because his work was close, he had chosen to live with his grandparents, away from us. "When will you come to visit? It's been years since you last did. The two of them really want to see you." "I'm sorry. I've been so busy and just couldn't make it to the family home." "Busy with what? Isn't it because of Dad and Grandmother?" He hit the nail on the head. The reason I couldn't visit was indeed because of those two. Raymond didn't like the idea of me visiting my parents. As a homemaker, Raymond only sees me as a mere housekeeper. He has this ridiculous notion that I should always be taking care of the home. And his mother-in-law, shared the same view. She too only saw me as a convenient housekeeper, always expecting me to tend to the house. So, I felt trapped, unable to leave and just living within the confines of our home. It felt like I was a bird caged up. Eric knew this. He once visited this house and remembered the words Raymond and mother-in-law had hurled at me. "Aren't you a homemaker? Then you need to do your household duties properly. A housekeeper who can't even do chores is useless anywhere. Be grateful you're even needed here by us." It was then that Eric first realized the treatment I was getting from the two of them. "I thought as much." "I'm sorry for making you worry." "Listen, Mom, I have an idea." Then, Eric suggested something unexpected. It was something I hadn't ever considered. "Really? Are you serious?" "Of course. It's to help you, Mom." While it might seem obvious, Eric's words became the lifeline I needed from my hellish life. From the next day, while Raymond was at work, I started implementing what Eric had told me to do. being cautious not to let Raymond notice and always vigilant for the often unexpectedly appearing mother-in-law. There were a few close calls. "Hey, have you been up to something lately?" "Why do you ask?" "Mom mentioned it. She said you've been acting differently. You're not cheating on me, are you?" Last time, I was saved by Raymond's ridiculous misunderstanding, but I can't underestimate my mother-in-law. She's sharp. I need to be more careful and not let my guard down around her. Still, it's clear that Raymond doesn't really care about me. Well, that's fine. It actually makes things easier for me. In fact, it's a relief. I can't wait to see how they'll react to what comes next. Ring ring. "Mom, how far along are you with the preparations?" "I've got everything ready and have made a lot of progress. Now, we just wait for the day." "Speaking of which, do you know when grandmother is moving in?" "She's moving in the day after tomorrow." I overheard them talking about it when they were in a good mood. I have to make sure they pay for everything they've done to me. The climax is approaching. The morning my mother-in-law is set to arrive. Don't slack off just because I'm not around. Also, help Mom with the luggage when she gets here. And keep the house clean. Mom said she won't forgive even a speck of dust. I understand. After seeing Raymond off, I start the final preparations. Then, the doorbell rings. "Good morning, Mom." "Eric, I'm sorry, but can you help me?" "Of course. Let's get this done quickly before grandmother arrives." With Eric's help, we finalize everything. And 30 minutes later. "All right, let's go." I hop into Eric's car, and we head to a certain place. Ring ring. "Hello?" The moment has arrived. Raymond and mother-in-law have tormented me endlessly. I don't even know how many tears I've shed or how much pain I've endured. Yet I've persisted, trying my best as a homemaker. But Raymond never seemed to care about my struggles. And he decided to move in with his mother without discussing it with me. Is Mom all settled in? Of course, she is. But guess what? Yes, she's all settled. And I've just finished moving back to my parents' home. What? Back to your parents? Raymond's panic was evident, even over the phone. But that's not the end of it. He's got a lot coming his way. I delivered the final blow to Raymond. Today's the day we get divorced. The divorce papers, already filled out with your name, are on the table. When you get home, all you need to do is sign and take them to the courthouse. Just to make sure there's no delay, I've arranged for a lawyer to accompany you. The lawyer will also discuss the division of our assets. Raymond, taken aback, blurted out. Wait, what are you talking about? Divorce? Are you kidding me? No matter what you say, it won't change my mind. Oh, by the way, we don't have a single cent in our savings. What? That can't be true. I've been contributing every month. Yes, but your dear mother gambled all that money away. We have nothing left. What? I suggest you and your mother figure things out. Good luck. Right after ending the call with Raymond, his mother showed up at the house, arms laden with bags, enthusiastically ringing the doorbell. I didn't answer. Infuriated, she yelled, Hey! Open up! How long are you going to keep me waiting out here? Open the damn door! You wretched woman! Get out here! Her screaming and swearing at the front door attracted the attention of a passersby. They suspected her of causing trouble and called the police. In just a few minutes, officers arrived and took her away. About 30 minutes later, a distraught Raymond, unable to focus on his work after hearing the news, rushed home. But I was nowhere to be seen. The only thing waiting for him was the divorce paper on the table. The sight left him completely speechless, and he just sat down, devastated. 2 hours later, the lawyer arrived and accompanied a despondent Raymond to the courthouse to submit the divorce papers. At last, our divorce was finalized. The next day, after being released from police custody, Raymond's mother came home, only to find her son deeply affected by the shock of the divorce. Although Raymond had planned to live with her, The trauma of the divorce made him take a leave from work, and a month later, he resigned. With no income, he had to sell the new house they had just built. They managed to get by with the money from the sale, but his gambling-addicted mother depleted it all. Rumor has it they now live like homeless people in a nearby park. After the divorce, I began to live peacefully at my parents' house. The money from the sale of the house came to me as well. With that money, I commented, "This place is lovely." Yeah, it's a popular resort hotel these days. I was on vacation with my family. Finally free from the nightmare, I could live my life on my own terms. That joy is unparalleled. Thinking he's cheating is just your imagination running wild. If he is, maybe there's something lacking on your part. Like, not being charming enough. When I shared my worries, Susan laughed them off as if they were nothing. She then left me behind and headed for the register. I, alone, bit my lip, unable to say anything. With a pale face and shallow breaths, I hurried home with Nancy. Arriving home, I was surprised. A car was parked in front of what should have been an empty house at this time. It was a company car with Daniel's company name on it. Tentatively, I quietly opened the front door, and there were Daniel and Susan's shoes. And from the bedroom, loud voices could be heard. I hurried out of the house and headed for my parents' home. "Dad, something terrible happened to Susan." I'll make her regret taking me and Dad as her enemies. I'm Jennifer, a housewife in her early 50s. What I love is reading books, and both making and hearing jokes. Though I look like this, my bright personality is definitely my strength. Even though I look quiet and have a quiet appearance, people have told me that I'm like a comedian when I talk to them. And I have a family member that is exactly the opposite of me. Unlike me, who resembles Dad with small eyes and a nose, my sister Susan, who is glamorous and beautiful, takes after our mom. I've been ridiculed for my looks by her since forever. For instance, something I'll never forget from over 30 years ago. Just after graduating high school, I was trying hard with makeup I wasn't used to when suddenly Susan spoke to me. "Ew, you're trying to put on makeup, Jennifer? It doesn't suit you. Why don't you just stay barefaced and blend in with the old ladies?" Even when I was indignant, she kept looking down on me without a hint of remorse. Like this, my memories of Susan have always been of her being mean and selfish. As we grew into our 20s, Susan became an elementary school teacher. I had gotten a job at a local company, but she even ridiculed that. After all, private sector jobs have no security, huh? In my case, as a civil servant, I'm absolutely secure. It's the best. Susan was terribly boastful, but our mom, who had been a teacher at the same school, sighed with a puzzled look. Our playful Dad managed to turn even that situation into a joke, making us laugh, but my heart only completely cleared up when Susan wasn't around. I fell in love when I was in my 3rd year at the company, at the age of 23. The person was a colleague from work, a quiet man wearing glasses, named Daniel. Heading out for dates, I was met with a lot of sarcasm from Susan every time we met. From my clothes, makeup, to even my taste in partners, she criticized everything. Still, I brushed it off as usual and deepened my love with Daniel. I'm going to marry Daniel. I've already introduced him to Dad and Mom. I hope you would meet him too. I reported my marriage to Daniel over the phone. Then, Susan, who was single at the time, said in a clearly angry tone, "Huh? Getting married before me? Unbelievable. You're supposed to let me marry first. How low?" As for me, whatever. There was nothing to say but. And I got married without flinching. I believe I was truly happy, spending pleasant times with my husband Daniel. Before long, Susan also got married. Her marriage seemed arranged, and I worried she might have been competing with me. Her husband, Brian, was a fellow teacher like her, a very serious person. Susan had children before I did, and I remember feeling relieved that I didn't have to hear any snide remarks this time. Things were peaceful then. I never imagined that this peace would soon be shattered. After giving birth, I quit my job. Busy with childcare, I increasingly neglected my appearance, and both my hair and face became a mess. Then, Daniel started to neglect me all of a sudden. "You've suddenly turned into an old lady," he'd say, passing by with a sigh. I wanted another child, but Daniel was opposed and wouldn't agree. I was truly shocked and even considered divorce. When I consulted friends and parents, everyone listened sympathetically. Troubled, I even consulted Susan during the summer break at our parents' house. It was a desperate attempt, but the response was less helpful than clutching at straws. "It's a miracle you even got married. If you're going to complain, just divorce him now. Complaining is annoying." Susan said this in a bothered manner, then went out to play after fixing her makeup. Left behind was Brian, taking care of the kids, looking somewhat cramped at his wife's family home. While thinking I couldn't get along with Susan, I was troubled by Daniel's coldness. Yet, time passed without me being able to decide to leave him. Now, nearly 30 years later, the worries of my youth were lost in the busyness of life, and I ended up not divorcing Daniel. The romantic feelings were long gone, but I still considered us comrades under the same roof. When my daughter Nancy became a middle schooler, I started a part-time job as a cashier, giving me a place outside of home. However, the store where I had been working part-time for many years was going to close. "The store where I work part-time is closing, so I'll be unemployed starting next month." I reported this during dinner, and Daniel looked up, seemingly a bit surprised. Nancy swallowed her hamburger and said, "That's fine. Mom, you've been working for so long, why not take it easy for a while? If Mom quits her job, we can have weekends off together. Let's go on a family trip or something." I was happy with Nancy's suggestion. Until now, it was hard to match schedules with me being busy on weekends and Daniel having weekends off. But, as Nancy said, now it would be easy to coordinate. Nancy works in the service industry, so despite being a full-time employee, she can choose her days off to some extent. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, Daniel suddenly spoke to me. It was rare for us to have a conversation, except when watching TV. "If you're not going to the part-time job, does that mean you'll be home all the time? Let me know if you have plans to go out." Thinking he was worried about dinner, I casually answered, "I don't have any particular plans, but I'll be back by evening even if I do." Daniel nodded ambiguously, still seeming to want to know. It was unusual for him to be this controlling, but I told him I'd inform him in advance if I was going out. Becoming a full-time housewife again after so long. Doing the same housework as before, I was astounded by the free time during the day. I tried to enjoy it by increasing my reading time and experimenting with cooking, but still, there was too much free time. Above all, I missed having opportunities to talk with other people. Moreover, recently Daniel has been coming home later. When I asked why, he said it was because his workload at the company had increased. So, I decided to visit Dad, who lives about a 10-minute drive away. Since Mom passed away a few years ago, Dad has been living peacefully with 2 cats. When I went to visit him with some homemade sweets, he was pleased to see me. "By the way, Jennifer, have you seen Susan recently?" While we were having a pleasant chat, Dad suddenly asked me this question. Since we don't meet except during summer vacations or the Christmas season, I shook my head. Then Dad said, looking perplexed, "Susan works at a school not too far from here, so it's close, right?" I wanted to share some good pickles we bought, so I called her to stop by after work. But she came in quite flashy clothes. Is that the trend now? I couldn't answer since I hadn't seen the actual outfit. Incidentally, I don't like pickles, but Susan loves them. Something was odd. Susan's mobile phone rang on the table, and when I tried to pass it to her, she got really angry and said not to touch it. She also insisted on keeping the mobile phone face down, and when I warned her the screen could get scratched, she glared at me. It was just a small story, but I felt a complex mix of emotions. That's because Susan used to not care about how her mobile phone was placed. Wondering what was going on, I returned home. At dinner that day, I casually mentioned this story in front of my family. I stopped by our parents' house today, and it seems something's off with Susan. She's become flashy, and she insists on keeping her mobile phone screen down. I wonder what's happening. To me, it wasn't just a feeling of discomfort, but also one of worry. Then, Nancy spoke up. Maybe Aunt Susan is having an affair? I almost dropped my fork in surprise. Daniel choked on his soup. I saw somewhere that those are signs of someone having an affair. There are also other signs like going out more, coming home late, excessively checking the partner's schedule, and so on. Hearing this, I instinctively looked at Daniel. Some of the traits Nancy mentioned matched him perfectly. I thought it was overthinking, but I couldn't help but be concerned. Don't talk about those things outside the house. It's embarrassing. Daniel frowned, having noticed my gaze. The next day, I unexpectedly encountered Susan. I ran into her at the convenience store near our house. Wait, Susan? It's rare to see you around here. Going to Dad's place? Perhaps because I spoke so suddenly, Susan jumped in surprise. Turning around, Susan was wearing heavy lipstick and a large scarf. Her outfit was flashy, and I could understand why Dad was concerned. After chatting briefly with Susan, I remembered the conversation from last night. It was difficult to ask her directly, but I thought maybe I could discuss about Daniel. Yesterday, Nancy was talking about the signs of someone cheating, and a lot of it matched up with my husband. I was shocked. It couldn't be, right? I'm kind of worried. Ignoring my sigh, Susan browsed the drinks. Then she replied in a light tone. Thinking he's cheating is just your imagination running wild. If he is, maybe there's something lacking on your part. Like, not being charming enough. Her attitude seemed to dismiss it as not important, which irritated me a bit. Susan quickly ended the conversation and headed to the register. Left behind, I bit my lip, unable to say anything. Then, a few weeks later, on a Sunday, just as I had almost forgotten about the conversation on cheating, I was out to see a movie. To enjoy a movie I was looking forward to in a good environment, I traveled a bit farther to a new cinema. Just as I was about to arrive, my mobile phone suddenly rang. Mom, I'm sorry. Can you come pick me up? I feel sick, Nancy said with a strained voice over the phone. I was surprised. What happened? Are you okay? I'll come right away, so wait for me. I hurriedly changed my destination to Nancy's workplace. When I arrived, Nancy had come out to the building's exterior. It seems the cause of her ill health was her period. It was so bad, she even felt nauseous. Let's just go home for now. I'll go to the gynecologist later, Nancy said, so we headed home for the time being. A few minutes later, I drove safely and arrived in front of my house, and I tilted my head. The company car of Daniel's workplace was parked in front of our house. Since Daniel is in sales, he might have stopped by the house in the middle of his rounds for some reason. Perhaps he forgot something. He knew I wouldn't be home today, so it's possible he couldn't ask me to receive a delivery. Without thinking much, I parked my car and opened the front door with Nancy. There were women's shoes. Women's shoes that weren't ours were in the entrance. Of course, Daniel's shoes were there too. I felt a chill run through my entire body. The conversation about cheating suddenly came back to me. Then I noticed strange noises coming from the bedroom. It seemed they hadn't noticed us yet. Leaving a pale-faced Nancy, who was feeling sick not just from her condition, at the entrance, I approached the bedroom. And then, I stopped. Because I recognized the voice more than anyone else's. "Susan," I murmured involuntarily. Daniel was in the midst of it with Susan. I quietly returned to the entrance without making a sound. Leaving the unwell Nancy at the entrance, I hurriedly drove off. I was headed to my parents' house. Arriving at my parents' house, Dad was just tending to the garden in the yard. "Dad, something terrible happened to Susan." I pulled Dad into the car. Dad was somewhat muddy, but that was the least of my concerns. I explained the situation as we headed back home. After hearing everything, Dad nodded with his mobile phone set to record mode. "All right, leave it to me." Dad, holding the latest model mobile phone he had lined up to buy using his ample free time in retirement. At this point, it was hard to guess what he was planning to do, but I was beyond trying to stop him. "Do you want to go in seriously, or do you want to make a mockery of it?" Asked this, I responded immediately. "Please make it somewhat humorous at first. I'm definitely going to divorce him, so I want to hire a lawyer and show them this. There might be 2 dirty bodies caught on camera, and we need to neutralize the grossness." Dad nodded firmly. Before long, we arrived home. Nancy was sitting outside the entrance, hugging her knees and looking down. As we approached, she lifted her face and said, "They're still at it. So energetic for their age. And sorry, I felt so sick I threw up." Nancy looked really distressed. She had come home early to rest, and getting caught up in this was the last thing she needed. Feeling incredibly sorry, I stroked Nancy's back and spoke to her. "I'm sorry, Nancy. You can go to your room if you want. Can you walk?" When I asked, Nancy slowly got up. I opened the door quietly, noticing where Nancy had vomited, and couldn't help but laugh. Now, it was time to go in. Dad and I exchanged glances and headed for the bedroom. Sounds of engagement, though slightly subdued from before, continued from inside the bedroom. "Let's go, on 3. Dad whispered to me and then flung the door open all at once. The 2 on the bed screamed at the sudden intrusion. The ones who wanted to scream were us. What on earth were they doing on the bed where I sleep every night? The 2 were literally in their birthday suits, intimately close to each other. Considerately, they had laid down a bath towel, presumably to avoid soiling the sheets. If they were going to be that considerate, I wished they wouldn't have done it at our house. "Whoa, Ben!" Daniel was the first to regain his senses. Susan, with smeared lipstick, looked bewildered, desperately trying to cover herself. Stepping into the scene, Dad began his act of scolding Susan. "Susan! What are you doing at over 50 years old? Have some shame. And you, Daniel. Betraying Jennifer, and with Susan of all people. I won't forgive this." While shouting, the fact that Dad was firmly holding the camera showed he wasn't simply lost in rage. Dad has always been like this. The stronger his anger or surprise, the more calmly he acts, deftly maneuvering the situation to the other party's disadvantage. But to Daniel and Susan, caught in the act, such judgment seemed far beyond their grasp. Usually seen as the fun grandfather, Dad, with his eyes narrowed in anger, had them completely terrified. Handing me the mobile phone, Dad approached them even closer. When did this start? How long have you been doing this? Disgraceful, both of you. His face turning red, he shouted incoherently and then suddenly collapsed onto the bed. For a moment, I panicked, thinking he might have really fallen ill, but he purposefully fell into a clean space, indicating this too was an act. I immediately played along with Dad's act. Dad! This is serious. His blood pressure must have spiked. Maybe a blood vessel in his brain burst. Is he even breathing? While pretending to panic, I kept the mobile phone camera firmly on Susan and Daniel. Susan, fixated on Dad, didn't notice I was recording. She just turned pale and quickly said, "The inheritance, we need to discuss it." Daniel's face was also pale, but he seemed genuinely shocked by Susan's reaction. Covering himself with a fallen pillow, he muttered in a dazed state, "Is that really what you're worried about right now?" I felt the same. Then Dad got up, sighing at my frozen Susan. Susan, that really brings Dad down. The lowest. How did you turn out like this? The look on Dad's face was genuine, not acting, showing his deep disappointment. As Dad stood up, Susan frowned as if realizing the seriousness of her mistake. While capturing the indecent exposure of Daniel and Susan, I provoked further. That's awful, Susan. The first thing you think about when your own father collapses is that. I guess it's natural for someone who does such things with her sister's husband would say something so different. Susan turned an angry face towards me, only then seeming to realize she was being recorded. Dad and I switched hands on the mobile phone while keeping the camera pointed at my screaming sister. I wanted to catch Daniel, who was starting to put on his clothes in the corner of the room. Hey you! Don't you dare run away! Nancy is feeling so ill she had to come home. It's cruel to make her deal with more chaos when she's already vomiting from being sick. Hearing his daughter's name, Daniel let out a small scream. He seemed shocked by the fact that Nancy found out about this situation. Daniel shouldn't have done it if he had the heart to worry about getting caught. I couldn't help but feel angry. The two of them were naked in bed, clearly in the middle of an affair. Oh, here's an empty bottle of an expensive energy drink. Looks like they were really into it. Facing the mobile phone poised by Dad, the speaker begins to narrate like a reporter. Just when the scream was let out, Susan, wearing only a coat, fled from the bedroom. My daughter whom I've raised with so much care is outside in just a coat. This is tough. Dad's voice follows the Susan's back. The Susan, attempting to escape to the entrance, screamed again. No way! What is this? I, having an idea of the cause, caught up to Susan without surprise. In fact, at the entrance, Nancy had vomited on the shoes of Susan and Daniel. The women's shoes were very clean and seemed a bit expensive. Filled with plenty of Nancy's, it's understandable one would scream. Susan! Where do you think you're going? You won't escape. Dad and I catch up to Susan, who stopped, startled. Then, along with Daniel, we sit her down to ask about what happened. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm really sorry. When did this start? Probably 2 years ago. While making excuses, Daniel looks towards Susan. Wondering what it was, Susan irritably corrected him shortly. 3 years. It seems the infidelity began 3 years ago. The year Susan started working at her current school. Irritated by Daniel, who couldn't even remember the period correctly, and appalled at Susan, who corrected him diligently. Both of you owe a deep apology to both Jennifer and me. Prompted by Dad, the two repeatedly offered deep apologies to me on the cold floor. Susan is in just a coat, and Daniel is in his birthday suit, both feeling awful. I feel like vomiting too. Of course, the recording doesn't stop. If I release this video to the public, I wonder if I'd be the one committing a crime? But it should serve as evidence. I nod vigorously to Dad's words. Then, with a trembling voice, the Susan began to proclaim a mysterious theory. Families can't sue each other. Surely, within a family, it's not a crime. Honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. How could she say that such a serious misconduct as infidelity within a family isn't a crime? Upon further inquiry, it seemed she was misinterpreting a rule that theft among family members may not always be considered a crime. Even so, you'd think it's obvious this case wouldn't apply. A few hours later, Nancy and I sought refuge at Dad's house. I didn't want to be inside a house where such things had happened. We urgently needed to find a lawyer. Given Susan is married, it was necessary to inform her husband and children as well. I'm in for a busy time, I thought, rolling up my sleeves. Being betrayed by Daniel and Susan was a real shock. The fact that I wasn't hungry even at midnight was because my appetite had completely vanished. Closing my eyes, I couldn't sleep, recalling the disgusting voices of Susan and Daniel. Yet, I didn't feel defeated. Not sadness or despair, but anger filled my heart. Days later, I visited a lawyer's office. Showing him the footage, the lawyer watched intently, taking notes without a laugh. But when Susan brought up the "families can't sue each other" mysterious theory, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ah, so that's where the lawyer's funny bone is, I thought admiringly, though it was pointless. According to the lawyer, I could claim alimony from both Daniel and Susan in the divorce proceedings. Of course, a divorce was also possible. Considering the division of marital assets and the possibility of being claimed for alimony by Brian, Daniel seemed likely to end up penniless. Furthermore, I discussed wanting to tell everything to Susan's family and Daniel's parents, my in-laws. The lawyer advised that it would be best to wait until the divorce was finalized. So, I immediately went to get the divorce papers. They were to be presented to Daniel as soon as the consultation on the division of assets was finished. Just 1 week later, my divorce was finalized. Perhaps thinking there was no way to deny it after being caught on tape, Daniel agreed to the divorce without fuss. I was the one who filed the divorce papers, and Daniel went to work as usual today. He must be acting as if nothing happened at work right now. After filing for divorce, I immediately visited my in-laws in the neighboring state to greet them and show them the infamous video. My in-laws, having decent values, were furious with their son Daniel and understood my claim for compensation in the divorce proceedings. I told my in-laws, "I truly appreciate everything up until now. Nancy has decided to continue living with me. She's your granddaughter too, so if you'd like, please continue to have a good relationship with her. However, she has said she never wants to see Dad again and does not consider him a parent anymore. Please be considerate of that." My in-laws nodded in agreement, looking downcast. A few hours later, after finishing our talk and leaving Daniel's family home, I headed to a place I had previously arranged to visit. It was Susan's home. Waiting there were Brian, who had taken a day off, and Susan's son, Thomas, who is already married and independent. I handed them a copy of the video and the lawyer's business card. "I intend to claim compensation from Susan in the divorce proceedings." "Of course, Brian, you can also claim from both Susan and Daniel." At my words, Brian nodded grimly. Then, the screening began there as well. Thomas left partway through and didn't come back. Brian watched the screen till the end, his face turning pale, tears welling up in his eyes. While I was at Susan's house, she came home. Looking at the clock, it was already 6 p.m. It had gotten dark before I knew it. Seeing me, Susan was so shocked she nearly collapsed. Noticing Thomas from another state and Brian, who would usually still be at work, she started trembling. "Welcome home, Susan. I'll be leaving soon. Discuss the rest with your family. Oh, and you should be getting a claim for compensation from my lawyer soon for the divorce proceedings. Make sure to pay it. If you don't, it might even reach your workplace, so be careful." With that, I left Susan's house. Getting into my car and starting the engine, I saw Susan running out and shouting something. But I had no intention of listening to her words anymore. I honked the horn briefly and decided to head straight home. About 6 months later, Susan and her husband finally got divorced, and she had to pay a hefty sum in settlement money from the divorce trial. It seems she really resisted the divorce and caused quite a fuss, leading to a lawsuit. Brian's lawyer was extremely good, and I heard Susan got thoroughly defeated. After the divorce, she was kicked out of her house and is now estranged from the son she struggled to give birth to. Now, she's turned to binge eating and drinking due to the loneliness of living alone and can't even fit into her favorite designer clothes anymore. She was able to pay the settlement from the divorce because she has a job, but life is tough. She once came to see Dad, but fled as soon as she realized Nancy and I were living there too. She called, probably to talk about debts. Dad said, looking a bit lonely. Even though she's like that, she's still his daughter. Speaking of the aftermath of Dad and his daughter, there's also the story of Daniel and Nancy. This was around the same time that Susan and her husband divorced. One evening, while relaxing and watching TV, Nancy got a text message. She frowned upon seeing it and immediately set it to block the caller. Turns out, it was from Daniel, asking to meet. Apparently, Daniel, who has never done housework, now lives in a place that's dirty with dust and mold. He's been eating out a lot, getting sick, and complaining about rapidly losing money. I don't know where he saw it, but he said he was shocked to see me and Mom walking arm in arm happily. He wrote that he wanted to walk with me too. No way, I could ever. Just thinking about it is disgusting. I want to erase his existence from my memory. Nancy visibly shuddered with genuine disgust. Dad seemed to miss his daughter despite everything, but Nancy wanted to remain a stranger to that dad forever. Now, onto a story of poetic justice delivered by sheer coincidence. I can't be blamed for this, but Susan and Daniel ended up facing even more consequences. Let's rewind to when Susan and her husband were in the midst of their divorce drama. It seems that not only were they involved, but Thomas's family got dragged into numerous family meetings as well. During such a tumultuous time, Susan's 4-year-old grandson, James, was observing the sad state of the adults. At 4, he's practically still a baby. Naturally, he couldn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Because of this, James ended up spilling the beans to his preschool teacher and friends, saying, "My grandma and my grandma's sister's husband was in bed naked. And so my dad, grandpa, and my great-grandpa got really mad. Why isn't it bad to sleep naked? Is it because you might catch a cold or something?" The other kids, finding the story amusing, told their families. Shocked by such an unbelievable tale, the parents likely gossiped among themselves. It's easy to imagine that even the teachers would have talked about it. The rumors spread uncontrollably. And just when Susan's divorce was finalized, the gossip reached Daniel's workplace and its associates. Somehow, the son of a business partner was the brother of Susan's grandson's friend. It's complicated and hard to follow. It just shows how unexpectedly far-reaching personal connections can be. In short, Daniel's infidelity became known at his company and among its business partners. Daniel quickly lost his standing. After all, not only was he divorced due to an affair, but the affair was with his sister-in-law, so being pointed at behind his back was inevitable. Just a month after the rumors started spreading, Daniel, whose career was once thought to be on the rise until retirement, chose early retirement due to the unbearable situation. Nancy learned of this outcome from her grandparents, Daniel's in-laws. "That's divine retribution," and told me while laughing. Susan's situation was even more severe. After all, she was a school teacher. Being in such a position, it was the last thing she should have done, and she quickly became the subject of rumors. The gossip spread from child to child, then to adults, and in no time, it was known across other schools. After receiving complaints from parents, Susan realized for the first time that what she had done was known all around. Perhaps because she felt too uncomfortable, Susan requested a transfer to a school in a more remote area, hoping to live quietly in a place far removed from her current residence. But it was too late. The rumors of her misdeeds had reached her new assignment, far beyond her neighborhood. Moreover, rural areas are often much stricter about scandals than urban ones. Eventually, Susan, who was once so proud of being a teacher, had to take a leave of absence. Due to the rumors that she had an affair with her brother-in-law, all her friends distanced themselves from her. Now, she feels scared to be gossiped about by strangers wherever she goes, becoming somewhat reclusive. She will likely end up resigning. This was all relayed to me from Dad, who had heard it from Susan. The network of rumors is frightening. There seems to be no place of peace for the two anymore. When I first heard about the gossip, I was a bit scared, wondering if there were rumors about me as well. However, it appears that because I'm seen as merely a victim, Susan's younger sister seems like a serious person. The rumors about me are relatively mild. I was relieved that my serious appearance worked in my favor. 5 years have passed since that incident. I remain at home with Nancy and continue to live with Dad. I and Nancy, who is still single, are living a happy life while cherishing each other. Dad is still very healthy, and the family home without the condescending Susan feels incredibly comfortable. Nancy doesn't seem too keen on getting married. Now in her 30s, she continues to work hard as a proud single. I wondered if our parents' disastrous relationship influenced her, but that doesn't seem to be the case. After all, in today's world, there aren't many benefits for women to marry. There are drawbacks in terms of career, though. Well, I wouldn't mind having kids, but I don't think I need a husband. Nancy shrugged, recently promoted and now holding a significant position. She's commendable, my daughter. There's a cute junior at her workplace who seems to admire Nancy, but it's uncertain where that might lead. While Nancy maintains a good relationship with her grandparents, I no longer have any contact with them. Since Daniel started living with his parents, they've been considerate not to bother me. Within 6 months after retiring, Daniel had no place to go. He was on the verge of becoming homeless, but his parents were kind enough to allow him to live with him. In exchange, he is under strict surveillance, and his parents manage all his money. Deprived of any freedom, Daniel spends his days exhausted from tough daily labor jobs. I heard through the grapevine that he's been complaining about the cost of his medication and how his health has not fully recovered. As for me, I've recently started working again. I found a part-time job at a library, surrounded by books I love. Seeing students and families borrow books and leave with smiles brings me great joy. Dad, Nancy, and I are also planning a trip together. We're excitedly debating where to go, which is already fun. Right now, I'm living my best life, thoroughly fulfilled.